Thank you guys for joining us today. And like Juan said, we're going to be talking about that sync data and why it matters. Um, it's sync data gets confused with CDR data a lot of the times. So we're going to kind of go through that and tell you what the difference is. Um, let's start off first by talking about CDR data. CDR data is going to be your call data, your called party numbers, called party names, uh, things like that, direction it's going, and that comes from a different data set. You got your that's your call data, right? And then we got sync, and what sync does, and and before I go too much further, we have sync for 4 different platforms. We have sync for Call Manager, WebEx calling, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom Analytics. So all those platforms have sync that will be used. Now, in Call Manager, it's an optional choice to use sync, and I'll explain a little bit later on how that works and where you can find that and things like that. With the other platforms, Zoom, WebEx, and Teams, they are mandatory to have sync as we need to be able to match up that sync data with the CDR data. So let's talk about the CUCM sync, and what all the syncs really do at the same time is they sync end user and device profile metadata that the CDR records do not contain. So there's a difference between the sync and the CDR data. And in Call Manager or CUCM, a couple examples are end users, departments, some custom attributes, device phone types, descriptions, and device pools. When you get on to the other ones, let's say WebEx. WebEx is going to be using that same metadata, but it'll be like WebEx calling users, groups, departments, and queues. Also with Zoom, there'll be phone users, groups, departments, and queues. And then also with Teams, there'll be phone users, groups, and departments. So let's take a look where we can find our sync settings for each platform and how we can set them up. So if you go to the gear icon top right, hover over that, and you can choose your platforms that you may have with us. And we're going to start with those Call Manager cluster syncs. All right, and you'll see the setup and administration page here. You want to hover over to the sync tab here on the top left. And you'll see we have a couple clusters here that have, you always see these, usually if it's the first time setting up a cluster, this will say enabled. That's going to be your database. But here you'll see some syncs that maybe have or have not been set up. Usually not if you haven't set those up yet. But how this works is, let's take a look at our Mexico City cluster here for example. Because we are syncing that end user metadata type stuff, like I said earlier, users, departments, device types, descriptions, device pools, and things like that. Those are set up inside of Call Manager, right? So let's say you have a phone that you changed the name to today. Let's say this morning, somebody left the company, new person came in, we're going to change the name of that phone. Now, the description of that phone or even the name of that phone is in that sync data. If we ran a report today without a sync, it's still going to show that older user that was connected to that phone. And this seems like it hasn't been synced in a while. So this would still, depending on when that was changed, that would still work, right? But in an example is, let's say that phone was changed today, but this sync never ran, or this was enabled at an older date, you might get some off data because of that. So what we want to make sure is we have 2 ways of doing it, right? So we can set up a sync schedule. If we go over here to the little schedule icon, we can actually create a sync. You can select the days of the week you'd want to run, your time, and your time zone. So I usually suggest having two syncs, one in the morning to take care of any kind of change that might have happened the day before, or having another one run during midday just in case for any changes that might have to be made, especially if you're running reports multiple times a day, just to make sure that we have that correct sync data. Now, we can also have syncs attempted and success, but also turning off the sync data. Now, what happens here is if we have this sync data button turned off, when we run a report, let's say, or an ad hoc search, we're automatically going to sync that data every time. Well, Dre, why wouldn't we just want to run that every time? Well, depending on the size of your environment, this could take a long time and make these reports run a lot longer. So this is why we usually say let's have, especially for larger environments, is turning on the sync data and setting up a schedule. So we can get that portion out of the way. So when we do run a report, that the report is only going to be generating from the database and not have to go out to the call manager and then resync that data. So it's nice to have that usually enabled. Smaller environments can kind of get away with it because not a lot of users that need to be synced. It takes a little less time. So it just depends on how long those reports are running, how long you're running reports for, how large the report may turn out to be. So we usually recommend having those things set up that way. All right. So yeah, we talked about the sync data checked and unchecked. So right now we would be using sync data that was last attempted here on March 15th. So if we ran a report right now, this would show data from this and before. If we turn this off here, we're going to be using live sync, let's call it, where it runs when the report is run. So best to have this turned on, set up a schedule, and even perform a sync now. And you can see I click that button and the sync is in progress. And it will finish on its own. You don't have to stay in the screen, so you can move around. So let's take a look at one of the other three platforms. As we can see here, this actually just updated on our end. So it's our last sync attempt, so it's probably in the process of syncing that data. So let's take a look at any of the other three platforms. They're all going to be kind of similar as the WebEx, Teams, and Zoom. So if we go look at the WebEx organization here, and we go to sync, we have a bunch in here. But as you can see, these are should all be updated because this is a requirement. As you can see here, there is no button to turn this off. With the way that the data works within these other platforms, we do have to have sync turned on. We can always sync quicker if we want, but when we set you up for the first time for any of these other platforms, WebEx, Zoom, and Teams, we will set up those schedules for you. And then you could also add some more schedules if there's a lot of changes going on in the background. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense on kind of how sync works. And let's kind of just revisit this real quick. Let's go back to call manager because we know that this is more optional and how we can change this. Let's kind of go over this one more time. So if this is turned off, we're going to be doing live syncs when we run reports or ad hoc searches. So this will, again, live sync with call manager when you run a report. So you do have that up-to-date data. But also the caveat here is if it's a large system and running a live sync for a large report can increase the report runtime pretty significantly. So we could turn that sync data on, make sure that we have a schedule, go in here, create a schedule, and then make sure that is up to date. Looks like ours did finally sync. And now you can see our last attempt was this time and it synced. So we're good to go to use that live data and shorten up those report run times a little bit. Also, if we go over to our call analytics and reporting, and we go to the data summary here, this is, if you guys weren't aware, the data summary tab up here at the top right gives you your available CDR data. Make sure that we have up-to-date data. Looks like we have not updated today, but that's okay. But we can also, it says CUCM data. This is going to be like our sync data. So you can actually run it live and kind of bypass that sync as well. But, for our sakes, we would just use the sync. So save on the runtime of these reports. Pretty quick, super easy, but very important for your environment to make sure that you have that updated metadata. Because if those users are changing or departments, managers, things like that, those people will change a little bit. It's nice to have to make sure that those are updated on our end when we do a report. All right. Juan, do we have any questions out there?
We don't have any questions at this moment, but then again, you did an amazing job. There's no need for questions.
It's a short, quick one today, but it is important. We want to make sure that these reports have the correct data. So it's nice to understand how that sync works, because it can be confusing with CDR and what the difference is. So
right.
Hopefully this helps everybody out there.
No, yeah, definitely. Very informative.